Greetings, book lovers and lovers of all parts of literature and life. Welcome back to E-Train Talks. I'm your host, E-Train, a 12-year-old literacy and kindness advocate on a mission to inspire others to love reading. And today is not your average day on E-Train Talks. Today, at the time of recording, is Yom HaShoah, also known as Holocaust Remembrance Day. It is observed as Israel's day of commemoration for the approximately 6 million Jews who were killed in the Holocaust by Nazi Germany and its collaborators, and for the Jewish resistance in that period as well. In Israel, it's a national memorial day, and to honor Yom HaShoah, I'm joined by a very special guest today. A couple months ago, I was introduced to Holocaust survivor and TikTok sensation Gidon Lev on TikTok. Gidon is making TikTok and social media history by educating people about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. He is a kindness hero, and he's teaching the world to be tolerant, and he's sharing the truth about the Holocaust and helping to put an end to hate and anti-Semitism. Gidon's story is an incredible one. His past may be filled with grief, but it's also filled with hard work, hope, and joy. He was born in 1935 in Czechoslovakia, and Gidon was imprisoned at age 6 in the Terezin concentration camp, where he remained until he was 10 years old. Almost all of the 15,000 children sent there were murdered at Auschwitz, Treblinka, and elsewhere. And Gidon was luckily one of only 92 children who survived. And since he's still here, he's able to share his story, and he's educating and changing the world. He's a father of 6 children, 14 grandchildren, and also some great-grandchildren as well. And without further ado, at 88 years young, he is, not me, I'm so excited to welcome Gidon to E-Train Talks. Thank you so much for being here.
That's a great introduction. Thank you. Very moving.
Thank you. And your whole story was so moving. And I knew that I had to interview you from the moment that I found out about your story. And I've never actually had the chance to talk to a Holocaust survivor before. So it's going to be a moving experience for me, and I'm sure everybody who's going to watch as well. And
Good.
my first question for you is, so I know from reading your book that your story goes far beyond your time during the Holocaust. You have lived and are living a truly incredible and inspiring adventure, and it's an honor to talk with you. But for those listening who've yet to read your story or hear about it, would you mind sharing some of what happened to you before, during, and even after the Holocaust?
Well, let's start from before, yes? Before the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, as you said, I think, and as I will say again, I was born in 1935, which does make me today an old man of 88, but I feel young. The fact is, I was born to a middle-class family in a small city called Karlsbad in German and Karlovy Vary in Czech, which is actually a spa. In that city is famous and was famous long before I was born, because there's a hot spring there that really boiling hot water comes out of it. And people went there to get special treatments against rheumatism or all kinds of illnesses. And you also drink it. And the fact is, it tastes horrible, but it has many good things in the water that is actually supposed to be very healing and very healthy. So Karlovy Vary, and we'll stick to the Czech name, was a wonderful town, and it is to this day. And I'm going to show you something.
Oh.
It's very interesting, because I was born in 1935, but I have a photo here from the year 1934.
Oh, wow.
And I will show it to you and then explain about it.
Hmm.
Here is a photo. Can you see it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. From, from right to left.
Hmm.
This is my great grandmother. This is my grandfather, her son. This is my mom. And this is my dad. And
Wow.
you can see they are simply walking along the river. You can't see the river. The river is here on the side. You can't see it. It's sort of a promenade. And this is 1934. But I'm there too. But you don't see me. Why don't you see me? Because I am in my mom's tummy. I guess she was about, at that time, about 4 months pregnant. You can't see yet, but you can see that they are all very happy and relaxed and just enjoying life. Even though at that time in Germany itself, this was 1934, Hitler was already on the rise and causing a tremendous lot of problems, especially to the Jews, but not only to the Jews. But they must have felt at that time very much at ease. We're not in Germany. This is Czechoslovakia, an independent, free country. What do we have to worry about them?
Mhm.
Little did they know what was in store for them. Little did they know. So I grew up. I was born in, as I said, on March 3rd, and the whole idea of of and the birth of Czechoslovakia actually took place in 1918.
Hmm.
If you know a little bit of history,
Yeah.
at the end of World War One, and actually, this man here, my grandfather, actually fought for the Germans,
Oh, wow.
for the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time. And when the first signs of anti-Semitism started coming out, being felt, he said, what can the Germans do to me? I fought for them. They even gave me the decorations of bravery. He had it. So he was totally not accepting of what people were, the rumors that were going around. And there were rumors, there were, things, there wasn't internet and there wasn't a telephone that you can put in your pocket. There was a radio and there were phones that you had to dial the old way. But they were very relaxed until 1938. In 1938, at Munich, which is a big German city in the southeast of Germany, Hitler called a conference because he wanted to do away with a part of Czechoslovakia. In other words, what he wanted was that the British and the French accept the fact that he wanted to take part of Czechoslovakia as part of Germany. And Chamberlain, who was then the Prime Minister of England, was there. The French uh, Prime Minister was there, I don't remember his name, and Mussolini, who at that time was already the dictator of Italy, was there, but the Czechs weren't represented. Why weren't they represented? Because Hitler didn't recognize the very existence of Czechoslovakia. And he told them at that conference in 1938, all I want is this part. you on a, I have a map here that I prepared specially. Here, this is actually only part of Czechoslovakia. This is actually just the Czech Republic. But this part here, the orange part, was the part that was very close. This is Germany, was right here, close to Germany. And he said, "You give me this part, and there will be no war. All I want is what is called Sudeten. Let it be part of Germany." And because Chamberlain had gone through the First World War and saw how terrible it was, they agreed. They agreed. And the Czech army, who had been mobilized at that time, was sent home. And within hours of signing this agreement in Munich, the German army on the main highway entered Czechoslovakia. And that was the beginning of actually the war, but it was without guns because not a shot was fired. And I was living in that area, as I said, in Karlovy Vary. And within hours after the Germans entered, all the Jewish people living there, like my parents and my grandparents and my great grandmother and uncles and aunts, started feeling of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism. Jewish shops were broken into, signs were pasted on the door, on the shop fronts. Jews don't buy, don't sell, who were employed in schools as teachers or in government offices or any official positions were totally removed from those positions. They were sent home. And as a consequence, my parents and my grandparents decided that they cannot stay anymore in Karlovy Vary. I just wanted to show you also another picture because that is very even. Now these are my other grandparents. This grandfather is the one from my mother's side, and this is my father's side. And guess who is in here? That's me. I'm 3 years old. I just had my birthday, and this is my loving grandfather. You can see he's holding me, my father and my grandmother. And they had a business. The business was scrap iron yard. They would buy all kinds of machines that factories went broke or closed down and then resell it. And they made a good business. Jews are known for being good business people to this very day, because that was one way that they managed to exist, not only then, but throughout the ages. They didn't allow Jews to own land, but they could have, at that time already, have little businesses, so sometimes bigger businesses. And they were good at it. So when the Germans entered Sudetenland, they couldn't anymore buy anything because nobody would sell to the Jews. And they couldn't sell anything because nobody would buy from the Jews. So 3 months later, after the German army was already inside Czechoslovakia, in that part of Czechoslovakia that I showed, my parents and grandparents, these grandparents, decided we have to go off someplace where we can live. So I remember, and this I remember as a little kid, I was 3 years old and I think 3 months. And they had given me a beautiful tricycle, red tricycle with black handlebars, and I loved it. My mother would say, You're riding it all the time until you go to bed. So put it aside already. And of course, at the middle of the night, I remember we went to the train station and everybody, and we all had suitcases and bedrolls and bags and a lot of stuff. And what did I have? I had my tricycle and I wanted to take it on the train. And of course, my parents said, Nine, nine, nine. No, no, no. You can't take it. We have so much stuff. Look what we have. We can hardly carry this. No, no, no. And my grandfather, whom I love dearly, this one here, said, I'll take it for him. I'll take it for him. I said, no, nine, nine. Because we spoke at home German and Czech. And I still speak German and not so much Czech. And so I didn't take it. So I made a cried and I yelled and I didn't help me. And they said, I remember my father said, "We'll buy you a new one." That never happened. That never happened. And 2 hours later we arrived in Prague, and we were living in a apartment about 3 floors up, right near the center of the town. And I was 4 years old. I was a little kid. I really didn't know what was happening. I knew that my parents were upset and were tense, and I couldn't take my tricycle, and I we were daycare center where Jewish kids could go and so forth. But I really don't remember many things. Don't remember many things. So this period is before the war, before the concentration camps, before the Germans ruled over all of the country. And actually, Hitler, of course, was bluffing and saying lies because a few months after he had taken that part of Czechoslovakia that I showed you before, the German army took all of Czechoslovakia, all of it, without shooting a single shot. Why? Because the army was in there, and the Czech army had been sent home, and the guns and machine guns and tanks and lorries that the Czech army possessed were locked up in storerooms. And I remember my parents saying, "Look, Hitler is up in the castle." Castle was it's called Ratchany in Prague. It's a huge castle way up on the hill, and that's the government house. And Hitler came there and said, pronounced, "There is no more Czechoslovakian Republic. It is now part of Germany. The protectorate of Bohemia and Morava belongs to Germany, bigger Germany." So this was the beginning.
Is it true that you didn't have to be a practicing or religious Jew to be sent to the concentration camps?
Yes, it's very much so. You see, in Czechoslovakia and also in Germany itself and maybe Austria, especially those 3 countries, the Jewish population was mostly middle class and integrated into the population of around them. So that in Czechoslovakia itself, and I'll concentrate on there, most, but not all, were not observant Jews. They were Jews in the sense that they felt as Jews. They celebrated the holidays. They maybe went to the synagogue once a year or twice a year for the holidays. They celebrated Passover and Hanukkah, but they weren't people who wore a kippah or dressed in long black dresses or you know the four that religious people wear to show the four corners of the world. No, most of them were people who were teachers, artists, musicians, conductors, poets, writers, engineers, architects, well integrated into the general population of the country. But for the Germans, you were a Jew if your great grandfather or mother were Jewish. 3 generations back, whether you were religious or not religious. When you were religious, the Germans were even more cruel. They made fun. They abused the religious Jews even more than the non-religious, even though in the end they had made absolutely no distinction.
That's so horrible that the Nazis did that. It's just, even if you don't even practice Judaism, if you don't, even if you don't even maybe even don't even celebrate the holidays, you're still in the general population, as you said. It just, hearing it, I've heard it before, but just hearing it again just really shocks
yes,
you.
I can tell you something. You see, the Germans were very organized and very straight, as we say. To this day, they are that. That's sort of a characteristic of the Germans. They never put a closet a little bit on an angle. It has to be straight. Started a process in Czechoslovakia. Not only it actually started in Germany, but in Austria and then Czechoslovakia. But slowly, weekly, monthly, they caused a total denial of rights to Jews. And they did it step by step. And I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, they didn't allow Jews to go to a restaurant. And if they did, only to a restaurant that was marked partially for Jews alone. Jews weren't allowed to ride a bicycle or own a bicycle. Jews weren't allowed to travel on public transportation, only on certain and in certain areas and at certain times. Jews couldn't own a car. Jews had to sell their apartments. Jews couldn't have a bank account. They were confiscated and given to the German Reich. Jews had to be at home after 8 o'clock. So every other day or every other week or every other month, a new degree was announced. And I don't remember all of them, but I'll give you an example how I personally, as a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, remember one time, right around the corner from where we lived, my grandpa, the one that I showed you, the one that's holding me here, this one. I loved him and he loved me. All the pictures I have are always he's holding me. He used to take me to a little park, and there was a little playground there, and swings and slides, and regular little playground. It was just around the corner. And he used to take me there, and I used to run. There was one swing there in the form of a boat, and I used to run to the boat and climb in. I was about 4.5, 5 years old then, and he would push me, and I was in 7-7. One day we come there, I think it was at the end of 1940, and he comes running. No, 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 999. You can't, please. And my name wasn't Gidon. My name was Peter. That's my original name, Peter Wolfgang Löw. There's stories about that too. Never mind. And I didn't understand what's wrong. Why can't I go on the swing? We always go on the swing. And he took me by force out and held me, and he showed me. You see over there? You see the sign? I saw a sign. Of course, I couldn't read it. I was only 5. And he said, it says, Juden verboten. Jews are not allowed. And it was another degree that the Germans, that Jews were not allowed into any public spaces. No gyms, no pools, no parks, nothing. And I couldn't even understand. I knew I was Jewish, but what does it mean? What did I do? Was I a bad boy? He tried to explain to me. Of course, I really choose it. I don't think I really understood. And by the time the end of 1941 came around, the Jewish population of Czechoslovakia, and especially of Prague, was so beside itself, so miserable, so dehumanized, so ostracized, segregated, dehumanized, that they said, what else can they do to us? So then they decided that the Jews are going to be sent to a camp, and the Germans didn't call it a concentration camp. They called it a resettlement. We're going to take the Jews of Czechoslovakia and send them all to Theresienstadt. There they'll run their own show. It was all lies, half truths. But by the time we got to that stage, the people were thinking, well, they've taken everything away from us. What else can they take from us? They weren't thinking of lorries and gas chambers and shooting and outright shooting lines. So it was a state of being that I can't even explain to you. I can't even explain how one human being can be so cruel and inhuman to another person only because he's a Jew or is black or is a LGBT person. We all are human beings, for God's sakes. But this was not the case with the German Nazis.
Last time I checked, you have 435,000 followers and 8.3 million likes. That is so many, and it's for a great reason as well, a great cause, because you're standing up against hate, against anti-Semitism. And I'm really curious to know what was there someone who inspired you to start your TikTok journey, or did you kind of have that feeling like with social media being so popular and hate kind of blossoming on it that did you have that obligation to really need to have a certain account like the True Adventures?
You know, um, it's a very good question that you asked. The fact is, I was not very connected to the social media. I wasn't. And I was married to my wife for 40 years, and she died 10 years ago from cancer. And I had always told friends and people I knew a few stories of here and there, and they said to me, Gidon, why don't you write a book? And when my wife died, I thought, wow, maybe I'll just write. I'll sit down and every day I have now so much time, and it'll help me overcome my sadness and my sorrow. And so I sat down and I started writing. And once I had written so many pages, and I think something like 60, 70,000 words, then
Wow.
I said, well, okay, now how do we make this into a book? So I started searching for a editor, and that's when luck hit me by meeting Julie, my who is today my partner, with whom I've been together for the last almost 7 years. And she is an editor. And at the beginning, when I first met her in a coffee house, she said, "No, I can't do this kind of work because I don't know anything about the Holocaust, and I do fiction." But somehow she uh, she uh, she was I guess she was a little bit struck by me. I was certainly struck by her, because she is almost 30 years younger than I am, and I have a daughter who is almost as young or as old as Julie is, and after a while we started working together, and then we decided, well, let's try and live together. And it's been a wonderful relationship that allowed me to grow and to express and to learn about computers and even about TikTok. And she is the one who actually introduced me. And it is, you can see from our book that we are writing this book together. We are writing this book together. We wrote it together. And it, because we became more aware of of uh, hate and anti-Semitism in the world, we decided that why don't we try and face some of these people, tell them a little bit about things, how things really were, answer them. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we ignore them because it's better to ignore them. I remember one person said, right out to me, he said, "You're a liar. You're telling stories. You're a liar." And my answer to him was, you know, I really wish that that was true, that I was a liar. Because if I was a liar, I would have had a father and grandfathers and grandmothers and aunts and uncles and cousins and even a child. and I have none of those. So please respect my truth. It is true. It happened.
I'm really curious to know, do you and Julie have any other books in the works? Or do you also eventually plan to write about the Holocaust more, I guess, for younger children or even a picture book possibly?
Okay. Once again, a good question, Lisa. Number of things. First of all, yes, we have an agent, and he's a serious agent in England, and he wants us to write a second book. He likes very much the book that we have put out now, and he's very happy. But he wants to have a book, a follow-up, and we are beginning to work on it. It won't be specifically for children, but you know, I I think that I can reach children by Zoom and sometimes even on other uh, platforms, and I'm happy to do so. Fact is, I have because um, Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day is coming up in 2 days. I think in 2 days or 3 days. I am scheduled to go to Jerusalem to a high school where one of my granddaughters is enrolled, and I will speak to an entire uh, shikwa, what do you call it, and about 5 or 6 classes, all on the same level, all um, 17, 18-year-olds that are in grade 8, grade 7, grade 8. And I will speak to them like I speak to you. I will tell them, have them ask me questions, and I will tell them and try and let them understand how it was done, that it was terrible, and that the most important thing is to prevent anything like it ever, ever happen again. Not only against Jews, but against blacks and Muslims and LGBTQs and homosexuals and whatever. We all have a right to live and not make other people suffer.
That is a beautiful message. We all have the right to live, and that is so true. But I'm also kind of curious from that. Many people say that history always repeats itself, and many times that is true. But do you think there's a way that we can really stop history from repeating itself and stop that pattern? And how can we do that?
How can you repeat the last sentence?
How can we stop history from repeating itself?
That's up to us. That's up to the people who are alive and connected and conscious and introspective. And there are many, many good people in the world. We don't always meet all of them. We meet some of the very bad ones too.
Mm-hmm.
And there are bad people, quite a lot. And sometimes they almost are unavoidable. But the good people, it is the good people who can make the world a better place. And you and people like you, young people, who can understand and learn and hear and read about history how things happen, why they happen, where they happen, what are the conditions, can make it better. We have the problem right here in Israel today. If you at all listened a little bit to what's going on here, we are not clean. We also do things that are unacceptable to me, in any case, what's happening here. So I go out and demonstrate and take signs and write and struggle and remain hopeful. And we can do it, and we have to do it. And especially you young people, the new generation.
Well, I hope that young people like me can come together and spread the truth, tell the truth, and make sure that an event like the Holocaust doesn't happen to anybody of any color of their skin, any gender, any religion, like you said. And I think that we can do it because like you use TikTok and other social medias for good, and I think that kids can really do that as well if we, because I'm also a kid, if we really learn to grow and open our minds to the past, but also what we can do to prevent the past from happening in the future.
Yeah, I think you couldn't say it better. It is in your, I don't mean you personally only, I mean in your generations and even younger people or older people to
Hmm.
be aware, to be connected, to be sensitive to what's happening, and not to accept when things are bad. Voice your opinion, voice your your criticism. Always think, what is the worst thing that can happen to me? Can they put me in jail? Will they kill me because I said that one of our uh, parliament uh, members is a terrible man, a racist? Let her, please. I'd love to be arrested and say, here I am, an 88-year-old survivor of the Holocaust, and I call this man a racist, a terrible man for this country, for this nation. He should never be allowed to sit in the parliament of Israel. And I won't even mention his name. And there's more than one.
As someone who has lived a life with so many experiences and adventures as well, what advice do you have for, I guess, staying strong? Because as even just the title of your story says it, The True Adventures of Gidon Lev, Rascal, Holocaust Survivor, and the last one is probably the most moving, Optimist. How do you keep that positive attitude, and how do you keep, I guess, looking at each new day and kind of living it the best you can?
You see, I don't have an absolute answer to it. I survived 4 years of a concentration camp. I survived hunger, cruelty, the loss of my father, grandfathers, grandmothers, uncles, aunts. I survived humiliation because I wanted to stay alive. Kids don't want to die, no matter when and where. They want to stay alive. That kept me going. Kept me going also in the concentration camp. It is something maybe that you are born with, partially, but maybe also something that in with time you learn that this is good. This is how I am. I when my book says rascal is because I always wherever I was, whatever circumstances I lived, wherever I lived, I always did a little bit things, eh, let's say breaking the law. Not dangerous
Yeah.
in a way that I would harm people, but you know, I didn't stick to all the rules. I didn't stick all the rules. I am to this day, and you can ask Julie. She reminds me when I drive. Don't do this. This is not a Gidon trick here. Uh, that to stay, to be, go out of your box, go out of your what we call for adults comfort zone, and that's not easy. That means you are comfortable in places where you know people and you know how to behave. But what if you are in a situation where that's not true and still you want to remain yourself and exist? Then you have to take chances. But you take chances a little bit more calculated. As you go older, you learn. And you don't fall on your knees and you don't get destroyed. You, be, you remain yourself and you remain hopeful and positive and continue trying to make this world of ours a better place.
That is so, so powerful. And I kind of want to stay on the topic of positivity because I think what makes, and also rascalness, if that's a word, because that's really what makes people, that's what I love about people like you, about optimists. You always look for positivity, for joy in the world. And uh, I'm just curious to know, it's kind of going back to the Holocaust, to concentration camps. So I saw on your website a picture of the Jude star that you wore. Do you still keep it to this day? And if you
Yes.
do, does it ever bring back bad memories? Or do you keep it with pride?
I will show it to you. I will show you.
Wow.
This is that my mother had to wear, and she was clever. You see, the Germans didn't give these out. The Germans made you buy them.
Mm.
And so my mother only, since everybody goes out of their house, they don't always wear the same dress or the same jacket or the same pullover, right? So you have to buy a dozen, 10, and sew them up. She refused to sew them up. So she took, I don't know if you can see, a safety pin, and she pinned it one day on the blouse, one day on the, on the jacket, one day on a sweater. Of course, that was not allowed. But the Germans couldn't stop every Jew on the street and stop them and check. So she took chances. That's the type of thing that I also did and do. Chances, maybe calculated. And by the way, of all the things that the Germans did before coming out with the degree that every Jew from 10 years and older had to wear a Star of David. That was the final stone that separated the Jewish population from the rest of the population. Because beforehand, not every Jew has a big nose. And therefore, the Germans could tell he's a Jew, she's a Jew. That's bull. That's not true. So many Jews, as long as they weren't identified with the Star of David, they could go in a restaurant or go buy some fruit or vegetable in a store that wasn't Jewish, or even go to a dentist that wasn't Jewish because they knew that dentist was very good. But the minute the Germans said every Jew must wear this, that was the final stroke of separation, degradation, humiliation. The Jews suffered. And this was my mother's. And I keep it and I hold on to it. And actually, I feel very glad of how terrible things were. I didn't have to wear them because I wasn't 10 years old yet. I was, when I entered the concentration camp in 1941, I was not even 6 years old yet. I was a little kid.
I'm curious to know about when you first came to Israel. How old were you, and what was the country like at the time? And I also know that since you were in a kibbutz, so can you share what it was like living in one?
Sure. Of course, that's a tall order to tell it to you in 5 minutes, but okay. You see, after the war, when we found out, we saw that no one from my family came back alive. The only one out of about 26, maybe even more members of the family who survived was my mom and I. And we came back to Prague. We waited. We saw that nobody else is coming back. So we moved back to Karlovy Vary. And for the first time in my life, I went to a school. I remember the school was just around the corner from where we lived in Karlovy Vary. And I remember that it was such a new experience to go to school, to learn, to read, to write, to do mathematics, because I hadn't learned really. I knew how to read and write a little bit because I believe, and this I sort of remember, is that in a concentration camp in Terezin, there was a cousin for a while there who must have taught me how to read and write, because otherwise they wouldn't have allowed me to go to grade 3. I should have gone to grade 4, but I knew enough to read and write, so they allowed me to go to grade 3. So when we arrived back in Carolina, I went to grade 3, went to school, and made some friends. One friend was actually another boy my age who survived, who came back to the same town. His name is Michael, and he still is alive, and he actually lives near Munich in Germany. And then we somehow went to a club, like a youth club for kids, and we started hearing about a Jewish state, a country for the Jewish people. At that time, it wasn't yet Israel because this was 1945, 46, 47. And we went there, and I went there, and the idea that I would be in a country that was my own, not in America, not in Canada, not in France or England or Germany or Austria or Czechoslovakia, but my own country. It seemed like a dream. It seemed like a dream, and I got very, very hooked to this idea. And we almost came here in 1947, 48. But then my great aunt, the sister of this great grandmother, her name is Rosa, lived in Brooklyn. And she signed an affidavit, which is sort of a guarantee that if we come there, she will make sure we have a place to stay and necessary. So instead of coming to Israel, we went to the United States, Brooklyn, New York. And Brooklyn, New York was like coming into a Jewish town. That part of Brooklyn was called Flatbush Church Avenue. Even the Shoeshine boy was a Jewish kid. And I felt very comfortable, except I didn't know the language. I didn't know the English. I knew one thing, one song. My bunny lies over the ocean. My bunny lies over this. It's the only English I knew. But, I went to night school and I started learning English because we arrived there in June 1948. School was already out, and I had to start new school. And then they put me into grade 6 in a public school. And I started learning. At the same time, I also somehow met kids who were playing in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, who were playing soccer, not baseball and not football, throwing this ball that looked like a pregnant banana. And they invited me to come to a meeting on Friday night to a Erev Shabbat, and I went. And it turns out it was almost the same organization that I belonged to in Karlovy Valley. And again, this talked about Israel and learned how to dance, folk dances and songs, and told stories about history, and I was hooked, continued to be hooked. And 10 years later, I came to Israel. I was at that time already almost, no, I was 25 years old. And I came to Israel not to become a doctor or engineer or a lawyer or some kind of professional, but a farmer. Come back to the land of Israel and work the land and milk the cows. And that's exactly what I did. And I learned how to milk the cows still in America. I went to a farm. It was a training farm near Hightstown, New Jersey. And I learned how to milk cows and to feed them and to raise calves. And by the time I arrived in Israel, I knew how to do these things. And I came to kibbutz and worked there and lived there for more than 15 years. And it's a very different and very special life. And you asked me in one of your questions, I think, to tell you a little bit what is kibbutz. Kibbutz, certainly at that time, it has changed somewhat. At that time, was a collective way of living. People lived in a village that had a central dining hall, that had a big barn, that had little rooms for couples and single people too. And everything was owned by the community altogether. not individually. Individually, your shoes, your shirt, your soap, all these things you were also given. But everything else, the land, the tractors, the fields, the cows, the chickens, the goats, everything was owned by the community itself. And the community governed itself. It chose a chairman every year or every 2 years. It chose a committee that ran the entire community, where you work, how many hours, who will work outside, who will become a teacher, who will take care of the kids, who will work in the barn, who will work with the chickens. And if you wanted to work with the chickens, but you were a good person to work with cows. So they said, I'm sorry, Gidon, you're going to have to work with the cows. We have enough people working with the chickens. So that's what you did. So it's, it's a very special community. Sadly, many of these kibbutzim over the years have dispersed and become privately owned places, but there are still a few. I have one son and a grandson who lives on the kibbutz, who is still very much governed and run in that way. And they have a big factory, and they're actually a very well-to-do kibbutz because the factory is making a lot of money. But the people are not getting rich personally, but they have a very big allowance, and they can allow themselves to travel from time to time and to go to movies and to go to theater and so forth and do trips around the world.
I'm also really curious to know, and this is the question that I ask every single person I've ever interviewed. So, if you could be, or if you could meet any author or any book character, who would it be and why?
I know you asked this question. Um, I think one of my favorite authors for a long time is Jack London.
Mm, me too.
And I loved his stories. I loved his books. I read some of them, maybe all of them. I don't know. Sometime, long time ago. And yes, I think he must have been also a very, very special person. Uh, I I'm not sure I can tell you what character I would like to emulate. But and this you might find funny. One of the books that I remember from a long time ago, from the time I still was only reading in Czech, was the the story of Robinson Crusoe. I don't know if you ever heard of it or if you read it,
I
but
have
did you?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it before though.
Yeah, it captured my imagination because here is a young man shipwrecked on a totally isolated island with nothing, and he somehow manages to survive, to eat, sleep, and and just make a life. And then finally, I don't know after how many years, he he was actually able to get off that island. But that character, that that idea of being able to survive under such a different and difficult situation, we have nothing to start with, is actually just almost unimaginable to me.
Well, I love survival stories and adventures, so I'll definitely have to read that book. And Jack London's stories are so incredibly vivid and wonderful. So you have made some very great choices. And I know this is going to be a tough question as well, but I always try to make the last question of the interviews some of the most, because that the everybody watching, that's the last answer they're going to hear. I want it to be I hope that you can give a special answer because you're a very special person. So, what is there one piece of advice or one quote that you'd like to leave everybody with?
I think the idea of hope, of not giving up, not giving in, is tied to also not forgetting. Not forgetting, not for the sake that we should cry and feel badly, but for the sake of making things better. As long as we are alive and can have a influence, sometimes on the simplest level, on the most basic level, upon our society, upon our people, upon our friends, and 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 also relatives. Let's keep doing it. Let's stay hopeful. We can make the world, and we must make the world a better place for all.
I love that so much, and hope really is so important, and also never forgetting as well. But I love what you shared about how hope is tied to never forgetting, and we always need, like you said, we always need to live our life with hope, not with sadness, not with fear, but with hope. 'Cause I read this book once and it has such an interesting and important title. It's called, I think I have it in my bookshelf somewhere. It's Hope Wins. And I think that really is true with what you said. Hope always wins. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Gidon. This is a day I will never forget. And I'm so proud that I have the chance to share your story with the world. You're an example of someone who lives their life to the fullest and without limitations. I really, really admire your passion, your determination, your kindness, your rascalness, your optimism. Thank you for taking the time today to talk with me.
Ethan, thank you for having me speak to you and tell you a little bit about myself. Yes, let's make the world a better place. I did mine and still am doing, but now it's your turn to do it with all your friends and relatives and good people of the world. Bye.
Well, thank you so much, and and everybody who's watching or listening, you can keep following Gidon's journey on his TikTok, Instagram, and he's as well as on his website, which is thetrueadventures.com. Until next time, keep reading and finding ways to spread kindness, but most importantly, when I say reading, I mean read The True Adventures of Gidon Lev. It is a story that will open your mind, and it will teach you that if you live with hope, you can make the world a better place. Bye.